talking with Lucian Tarnowski, Count Lucian, no less, a fellow Brit who I lived with in San Francisco at Civana House. He's creating a lot of collaborative community transmutational ideas of bringing people together and having a more equal and fair way of doing things. Hi, how are you? It's a great scene you've got there.
Good to see you.
Nice scene you've got set up there.
Yeah, well, we're up in the sanctuary, so we're I didn't really tidy up behind me, but it's a good little setup.
It's living.
Live streaming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There might be a bit of a delay on the stream. For some reason, my internet's a bit crap, so I'll try to speak less. Exactly. The humour that comes from jokes that we both know about. So, Lucian, tell us about yourself.
See you, buddy.
Nice to be seen. Tell us about you, where you've come from, your background, and then where you are now.
Sure. So, okay. Well, where to begin? Basically, I'm all about the return to community, and that's been the focus of my passion, my life, my work, my play. I think the majority of my life. My father helped set up the world's largest community around disability and leprosy in India. And so I was very privileged, and still am. Growing up, I traveled to something like 70 countries looking at community solutions, to both local and planetary challenges. And it's always been a big passion of mine. My father kind of raised me with those, to think about the world in those ways. And so where to begin? I studied a master's in comparative religion. I wrote my dissertation on capitalism, arguing that capitalism is can be defined as a religion and actually has its roots in religion. Did 4 years at Edinburgh University with that. And then once I came out, got involved in youth leadership work. I helped organize the world's largest youth leadership summit called One Young World, and got really interested in kind of movement building and community building. And that led me to start a company called Brave New that spent about 12 years doing online communities around societal change. So everything from learning communities to multi-stakeholder kind of collaboration and innovation communities. And we worked with all manner of companies, from Fortune 1000 companies to big movements. I've been kind of under the hood of at least 1,000 communities over the last decade. And I'm basically really interested in this concept of self-organizing collective intelligence. That could be translated as the human hive. How can we organize an appropriate response to the scale of challenges we have in the planet right now, through our collective intelligence? And I'm a big believer that communities are the most underutilized resource in this kind of like emerging space. So that's background. And then I started Civana now about 2 years ago. We have really two sides. We've got an online platform that basically provides digital tools for collaboration and coordination for multi-stakeholder communities. And then we have, where you used to live, Civana House, which is where we've been gathering together community leaders, systems change experts, basically people all across the spectrum of social change and impact. We've been gathering them together in this amazing place we get to call home on Alamo Square. That is the original well site of the Ohlone people. So it's the oldest gathering place in the whole of the Bay Area. And it was the house that was built by William Filmer, who built the Golden Gate Bridge. And so it's got a lot of history here, a great metaphor for what we're doing, which is essentially bridge building into the next kind of planetary system, planetary civilization, if you like, where we're looking at ways to accelerate our way towards that. And I guess the final thing I'll say is we just launched a game, which I'm really excited about. It's called the Unified Planet game, UP.GAME for short, Up.GAME. And we launched it last week with a festival on Earth Day, on 50 years of Earth Day. And we had over 100 speakers and practitioners and performers. Some of our favorites, Charles Eisenstein and Jamie Wheel and Amanda Sage and Daniel Schmachtenberger and Gone Gone Beyond and Janet Stone and amazing people like that.
Yeah,
and
great.
It was awesome because it reached 75,000 people. And now what we're doing is we're actually kicking off our first, it's called an up level, which is we're kicking it off tonight, all around sound, focusing on how we can get sound healing and sound technologies into hospitals for people that are dying from COVID. Is our first area of focus.
Right. You're connected with David.
I can kind of explain a bit more about that, but,
yeah,
but it's a kind of game to do social change.
You're connected with David Gibson on that front, right?
David's coming.
Perfect, perfect. I mean, because he's got the tech for that, and very interested in that.
He's a total wizard. I just got off the phone with him an hour ago.
Perfect.
So yeah. So the game is basically, I've been watching the kind of social change space for a long time, and I'm like many. I'm sure many. I know yourself and many out there in the world to believe that we need wholesale systems change. We don't need to just tweak what we currently have. We need to redesign the whole thing. And this is really illustrated in a study that Edelman does every year in Davos called the Trust Barometer. And that study shows that the 3 out of 4 people in the world, it's 4 out of 5 people in the world believe the system at large isn't working for them, is broken. And perhaps even more worrying is 2 out of 3 people in the world think the future is going to be even worse. So we've looked at a lot of different efforts around how do we accelerate systems change, and not just like incremental improvements, tweaking the current system, but like wholesale redesign and reimagination. And one of the kind of conclusions I've landed on, and I'm not the only one, is that the best way to do that is through a game. Kind of Buckminster Fuller had the same conclusion. He called it the New World Game. And so what we've launched with the Unified Planet game is essentially like our 21st century golden decade meeting of what Bucky called the New World Game. And the intention is these like 8-hour journeys, we call them an up level. And it's 8 hours where we bring a team of diverse community leaders that have expertise in a particular area. We bring them together virtually. And 4 hours of the 8 hours is focused on yin, on being. So it's all about self-mastery. It's all about play. It's all about like taking the exhale, like
right.
Connecting deeply as a group.
Nice.
Frankly, having a lot of fun together. And then 4 hours of it is focused on yang, which is all about collective action. It's about collective thriving, if you like, becoming. And so each of these 8-hour up levels result in what's called an upgrade. And an upgrade is 8 community solutions to local or planetary challenges. So these kind of recommendations that can be fundable, and we package up this the kind of result of the game into something that can be shared widely with people that are interested in the topic, but also with funders. And our intention is that the game can become a little bit like a kind of decentralized United Nations, like a kind of United Nations for communities, and give communities the ability to kind of return to sovereignty. Because frankly, like most communities are financially disempowered right now.
Right.
Like when was the last community you saw with a bank account?
Right.
They to become for a community to kind of have a bank account, they need to become something they're not, like a company. So the whole idea is, how do we provide financial sovereignty, financial empowerment to communities so that they can become a vehicle of change in the world? And if I'm a betting person, look back on history and see that for 200,000 years, the way we've organized ourselves has been primarily through communities. And then for this 200-year blip since the Industrial Revolution, we organized ourselves through companies, corporations, governments, etc., and created almost like the cult of the individual, where we're completely drunk on individualism. And the kind of intention here is, how do you return to community as a effective organizing methodology?
Wow, that sounds amazing. So in the game, it's like a co-op. Are you like forming a co-op and you're coming out with the strategies, and then what, does someone turn them into like business proposals?
Yeah, it's a great way. Exactly, bang on. So the game itself, the Unified Planet, is actually our intention is that it will be created as a platform cooperative where every player is an owner of the game.
Right. Brilliant.
And our goal is to have 1 billion players by 2030. But like, starting with this magic number of 144,000, because it's a kind of fun number. But the intention is that we can create an organizational structure using, it's actually a Swiss co-op. It's called a Genossenschaft, that everybody that plays the game will be an owner of that game. And but we're not doing that yet. We're just like prototyping the game right now. And so Civana is a foundation, and so that's right now just kind of being the fiscal sponsor, like setting up the game, because our intention is that everybody that plays the game can get paid for their participation based on each up level,
each success.
Exactly. Each successfully completed up level our intention is that people that can that participate in that up level can get paid up to $1,000 for their time in creating that 8 hours of work. And so we're going to funders and saying, hey, we have an idea for how to apply collective intelligence to problem solving based on these 8-hour kind of this 8-hour principle. We'd love to get people paid for their contribution here.
I mean, is this like a co-op think tank?
Think and do tank. So that's the second question you asked, is like, what happens to these like business plans? So these 8 recommendations are, our intention is they're fundable community solutions with the people that can actually execute them behind them. So imagine each up level creates a whole kind of pyramid of other levels. So this one up level around sound in hospitals is going to come up with 8 suggestions, 8 recommendations, and each one of those recommendations could have a whole new up level focused on it, specifically about getting it into execution. So I would say like part think tank in terms of applying self-organizing collective intelligence, but also like getting shit done, like actually moving it into action. And the most important thing that's missing right here is that communities are often coming up with the ideas they need to solve their own problems, but they don't have the funding to go execute on it. So if we can organize funding in such a way that communities can be like effective recipients of capital to affect social change, we think that's a really high leverage area of impact. And so one thing we've been thinking about is, a lot of people are talking about universal basic income. And it's kind of like, I'm not anti that. I think it's going to be a very important aspect as more and more automation comes, and inequality is a huge problem in the world. But I don't personally believe that distributing income to the individual is actually the most effective strategy. We have a hypothesis that if you distribute income to a community and then give those communities the ability to distribute that income, you're going to end up with better results, because people then can hold each other accountable. They can be part of a network that can improve their purchasing power, can improve their effectiveness, etc., can apply local solutions. And it's a tried and tested thing over 200,000 years. It's like how we've organized things for a long time. So part of what we're proposing is that basically the communities could get funding through the UP.GAME to actually go and execute on the agenda that they have around improving access to that community, to access to the commons, for example, that can deliver on their own social needs, for example, through this. And so we see this game being able to, piece by piece, take on challenges like how do we redesign the healthcare system or the education system, or tackle homelessness, or tackle like any social change or opportunity, any challenge or opportunity that's there in society could be designed into the game, and then that could be a way to bring funding to communities. It is the and we're starting the first one today, other than the ones we've been doing for our own internal teams. We've been running this for the last 5 weeks and doing kind of like internal experiments with started off with about 50 people, following a retreat that we were going to do in Esteland. But now it's like now it's the first up level where we're going to start to experiment with these concepts.
I mean, I noticed inside the structure you have half the yin and half the yang, which I really like. But why? Why the yin? What's the practical point of it?
Yeah. Well, our world is out of balance, and when you're out of balance, you're out of harmony. And what's the symbol of harmony? The best known symbol of harmony in the world is the yin and yang. Is that balance? And so we thought about that, and we were like, people think that to be effective you need to do this, like you need to work really, really hard. And actually, like, so much of our effort is duplicated, and we're not cooperating well in how we get work done. And so the first thing we wanted to address is, how do communities form deep bonds, deep spaces of trust, so that collective intelligence can really emerge effectively. And so we believe practices like breath work together, doing song and embodied movement together, and these practices that are actually ancient could be they're very worthy experiments to bring into this structure of a game. And it's also a bit of a reciprocity, right? If you're able to come and give 8 hours of your time, albeit we want you to be able to get paid $1,000 for it, but if you're able to give 8 hours of your time, and 4 of those hours is focused on your own self-mastery, and we're introducing new practices and immersive experiences, and just like basically trying to fit as much fun as you possibly can have in those 4 hours. And then that's prepping you and getting you into a mental state where your inner child, where your creativity is coming out to the forefront. But that's going to put us in the best possible position to reimagine aspects of our society that require radical imagination right now.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So do you think that this shutdown is actually beneficial for the movement towards consciousness?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think a caterpillar can become a butterfly without a chrysalis. And like, Mama Gaia has sent us to our rooms right now, and like we have, like, we had to have a pattern interrupt of our behavior. And actually, I feel that, at the same time, I acknowledge there's so much suffering and pain and financial insecurity and sickness and people dying, and there's all these, things that are happening right now. But like, if we can zoom out a bit and not just only focus on the suffering and the cost of these times. If we can zoom out and recognize that we did actually need a pattern interrupt for us not to completely screw ourselves. We've been driving so fast towards a cliff edge that, we needed something like this to happen. And I'm going to just put it this way. I'm incredibly grateful that the planet has unified around a common threat that isn't violence.
Right.
That isn't a war.
It's an aliens attacking.
And that's something to be. It's not something to be taken for granted. It would have been very possible for this unifying moment to happen with a kind of like a World War III situation, which would, to quote Einstein, he said, I don't know about World War III, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Right.
Basically, we really don't want this to go violent. And so what I'm looking at is, and I think many people feel this, is that what's happened in Corona times and, this like planetary scale shelter at home order is people have found themselves never before so unified, never before in the same boat. It's like the great equalizer in some sense, despite the fact that, I acknowledge that it's affecting poorer communities way more adversely than wealthier communities.
Right.
And it's really shining a light on income disparities, inequality disparities, all the rest of it. Acknowledge all those things. But big picture again, this is a opportunity for us to galvanize together and to reimagine, like, we're not going to go back to business as usual. There's enough people now being like, no, we're not going to do that, and actually they're getting really well resourced. And, right now I think it's just really the limit is our own imagination and our own audacity of like, what world do we want to live in? Because everything's up for grabs now. We can literally, like, anything we want, we can redesign. And so it's like, it's really a time for faith and a time for community and a time for love and a time for kind of going back to these things that were so forgotten in our weird, like, fast consumer oriented, drunk on individualism society where we were incentivized to do jobs we don't enjoy, to buy shit we don't need, to impress people we don't like.
So, I mean, you mentioned the disparity and the income disparity happening. There's a lot of talk about the big companies surviving this much better than all the small, medium-sized enterprises. I mean, are you worried somewhere that this is a kind of a digging in of the heels of the uber rich and a kind of a dissolving of anyone who could possibly challenge them by basically taking over all of industry?
The opposite of love isn't hate, it's fear. And right now we've got in society, the number one export of the world is fear. Like, it's being spread, and you've just got to be conscious of, like, am I being fed fear in terms of everything you're bringing into your system? Because we're like plants, we should think of ourselves like plants, and like soil. It doesn't matter what, how strong of a plant you are. If you're in shit soil, you're going to be a shit plant. So just be conscious of the soil you put yourself in.
Right.
And so, there's so much negativity being spread right now, and I think that's kind of bringing to the forefront. It's like a boil of the underbelly of society. These are like things that have been there for a long time that Jung would have called the collective unconscious. That's coming to the surface right now, and yeah, I mean, the companies that have been designed for resilience are going to be the ones that can get through this right now. But it's going to be that there's like to me, the kind of great shakeout is beginning that if companies aren't serving the common good, they don't deserve to be in business. And so I think now, like, more and more consumers will be looking to make active choices with their dollars, and really vote with their wallets. And so I would say, there is going to be a return to community, a return to small, a return to local, a return to the high street, a return to kind of victory gardens, and living local and celebrating artisans and that kind of thing. I definitely see that happening. And at the same time, the journey of these like giant corporations is not over. My invitation is, how do we think about this as a kind of include and transcend? Give these companies the ability to be part of creating a planetary commons. What I love to call a commonwealth engine, where we actually have this whole incentive engine to bring more and more value from society into the commons. If we can find a way to bring these brilliant people that work inside these corporations into the game where they're serving the common good, that would be great. I see this as a design challenge. It's a game design challenge. Right. And we've got a system right now that is working exactly how it was designed, because it's based on win-lose dynamics. Right. It's based on like a zero-sum game where, like, for me to win, you need to lose. Like, for me to take, I need to take from you. And this is massively oversimplifying, global economics, but it's like kind of a good essence of it. A zero-sum game of a win-lose system is ultimately a lose-lose system once you start to add in like autonomous weapons and AI and just all the things that are coming in the next 7 years. And so it's an absolute imperative, not just like this is a nice thing to have, and these like do-gooders over here are like going to be coming up with new, more just economic systems. No, it's an absolute imperative that we recognize the unbridled nature of free market capitalism to self-destruct and self-terminate the system and the planet and the ecosphere, and ultimately not create a world that's thriving for future generations. If we recognize that and we work, and we play, frankly, our way into saying, like, we have this incredible window of opportunity of 7 years, like this golden decade that we're currently in, where we get to kind of redesign everything. And we have all these tools, like we have AI on our side, we have like untold human intelligence, collective intelligence, all of this innate potential that's in so many people. You look at like the Burning Man community, so much potential there for transformation. Right. And this is what we're born for. This is like what we're coming together for, is to kind of reimagine the world we want to live in, and not for a second limit our beliefs that we can actually create that.
Lovely. I mean, it's a very upward, forward, positive conception of things. What are some of the things that you think might, people might need to look at, like initially now, in order to prep for that unfolding, for that cocooning into the cocoon to come out the butterfly? What are some of the things that people can do now and need to look at?
Well, I think the first, there's a lot of like sage wisdom around here. We can bring in like advice like Lao Tzu: if you want to heal the world, start by healing yourself. So as Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home.
Right.
So this question of like, what is your responsibility, your radical personal responsibility for your own healing, so that you can show up in service of this collective mission, which is ultimately a healing mission, a becoming whole mission, a coming home mission. And I think that is that's the first thing. It's like we kind of cut the umbilical cord to the spiritual in the mainstream system. We kind of separated church and state, and in doing so, we kind of we created this category of religion and this kind of category of economics, and in doing so, we actually became out of balance with nature, because nature doesn't have separate natural process from the sacred. It all is the sacred, and it all is part of this. So I think there's a big remembrance happening right now of who we are and what we're here to do. And this is why I think for me it kind of resembles the ancient future that we're creating here. We're directly experiencing the ancient future. And so, for those asking how do I respond, how do I adapt? I might have lost my job because of Corona. I'm feeling super motivated to be part of these transition times. We created the game for you. And so, what are the local challenges in your community that you could bring people together around to innovate and come up with solutions that ultimately could get funded and could be a new way of funding and executing on your vision for how you want your community to thrive and flourish.
I think that's beautiful, and a lot of things that I hear from people is that they're just this tiny cog in the whole machine. How can they make any difference? And I think you answered that beautifully in the taking a look at yourself first, as going into the very tiny can have these massive effects. Do you see that in your world, that tiny changes inside the being that is you, or someone else around you, but that tiny changes in them have these massive rippling effects on the outside universe?
I see that as a universal pattern of of reality, that everything is a fractal, and so kind of as the Hermetic principles showed with correspondence, that and as above and so below. It's when you start to recognize those patterns that are there in society, you can see how they play out in your own life. And when you bring a particular change into your own life, you can see how it ripples out into the world. For example, just relating to luck. For example, this is something I love to talk about. My client name is Lucky. And I'm a big believer, the more you actually have a core part of your identity as being someone that's lucky, the more luck you create. It's a perfect example. It's if you look at all of your friends and ask them to score how lucky are they out of 0 to 10, the people that self-identify as lucky will be the ones creating their own luck. It's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And so this is what The Secret teaches. It's what a lot of abundance codes, abundance thinking is all about. And so, again, the Hermetic principle of mentalism, everything starts with mind. And so your own relationship to your situation does actually have a tangible effect on your situation. It's and I say that recognizing that, not just recognizing my privilege, but holding my hand up and saying I'm literally one of the world's most privileged people. So I recognize it's I recognize that not everybody is in the same situation, and it's a privileged thing to even speak. But it doesn't mean that it isn't the case that your mindset does influence your experience of reality.
So, I mean, is that an actual thing or a more perception thing?
Well, perception is reality. So it's like your perception of something does actually shape then how you experience it. For example, if you perceive an experience to be really good and your memory of it is really good, that will actually continue to shape, your relationship to it. Whereas if somebody else has the exact same experience and perceives it to be lacking, like that they're in, like it really does shape, like, your being begins in your mind and the way you relate. And so I think this is why I think it's important to look at these corona times and say, yes, I'm not going to bypass and say this is a wonderful thing, but I am going to say, like the words of Churchill, don't let a crisis go to waste, and like, let's make the most of this and recognize that there might be not might be, personally speaking, there absolutely is nature's intelligence at work here. And how do we work with that in a kind of Aikido move, where we recognize that Corona is bringing in a particular energy, and we can use that as an Aikido move to literally redesign capitalism, and move it in a different direction, or let's go deeper than capitalism, the kind of planetary operating system, like the societal operating system, and that we are actually at a moment in time where we can do what I've been calling a civilization fork. It's like literally forking the code and saying, actually, we don't want to run Windows 98 of civilizations anymore, which is like the best politicians money can buy, this like failing nation state system, feeding people crap that doesn't actually like nourish them, just to make companies wealthier, and like blah blah blah. The list goes on. We are going to fork that, and we're going to go into like regenerative farms, like healthy food, healthy communities. We're going to go into like flourishing life where we don't actually need to work that hard. That's like the big secret here. It's actually going to take less work than the other system. The other system is drunk on economic growth and requires us to be like freaking slaves in this system that is actually very self-serving to those at the top of it, those that have actually designed the system that way. It's working great because that's how it's been designed for those people. But, I don't think it makes sense that we live in a system where 7 men own more than 50% of the world's population. So that's why we're introducing a new set of rules of the game, rules of the unified planet game, where we're introducing principles like the 100x principle, which is that no person playing an up level, no up level, no one can earn more than 100 times what the minimum you can earn is. So let's just say in this case, the maximum you can earn for playing the game for 8 hours is $1,000 for your contribution to that up level. That would mean that the minimum is $10. And what that then happens with this 100x principle with the game is that for the person to earn, that's earning $10 to earn, let's say in this case $20, they need to be on the team to actually help the people that are earning $1,000 to earn $2,000, and vice versa. Like when we actually tie the interests of the highest earners, those having the highest amount of impact on society, the more you give, the more you take, kind of thing. If you tie the interests of the highest earners to those, to the entire system, to those earning the least of us, what ends up happening is we're on the same team.
Right.
It's a game where everybody, like, nobody wins until everybody wins. And so there's these kind of principles that are actually pretty powerful economic principles based on things like donut economics. But we've designed them inside a game system where, honestly, like, if we were to go out there and say, hey, we've created a new planetary operating system or a new economic operating system, there's so many people that would want to take that down at the knees before it's even got stood up.
Right.
Because anybody that says that is way too audacious and like doesn't, tall poppy syndrome. Whereas if we go and say, actually what we did was we created a game where we're experimenting with new rules and we're looking to create the conditions for learning and rapid prototyping of like societal challenges, people are far less inclined to take it down at the knees because it's a game and everybody knows that games have game rules. And you can set, a game is free choice, right? Anyone can play. Just so happens that we would like many, many millions of people to play the game and ultimately create a system that is better than the current one we have, which frankly is not a tall order. The one we've got is really shit, you know? It's like, it's actually not, like, if we're only talking like, you know, 100,000 people or something, put their collective minds and hearts together to redesign the system, like, we could do a way better job than what we currently have, because what we currently have makes no sense. You know, it's like the healthcare system is designed as a sick care system. The food system is designed to make companies that are like distributing crap food and like poisoning the soil as much shareholder return as possible. Like, that's just bad design.
Yeah.
And so the question that, you know, many of us have been asking for a long time is like, how do we move into like a whole new system design, where it's like the design principles are based on win for all in for all life, they're based on like prioritizing the common good, including future generations, including the biosphere, including those that don't have a voice at the UN and places like that, like nature, and that's like one of the reasons I'm not just confident, I'm absolutely convinced that this is actually how it plays out, is because there's no alternative. It's like it's like it has to be, and whether it's the UP.GAME or whether it's some other attempt of creating you know, wholesale systems change, you know, more the merrier right now. Like, we're all in this together and we're all trying to like work to or play to you know, avoid spaceship Earth. You know, spaceship Earth's going to be fine. It's just whether or not humanity will right now.
Right.
Like, we're very fast approaching our own extinction. You know, we have created the tools and the technology of gods, but yet we've got the you know, we've got the temperance and the emotions of like children, and those don't go well together when Trump is sitting on a nuclear button and wanting to create more nuclear weapons, and like the nation state being a completely like out of date construct. You know, it's so I'm not saying that we won't have nation states, they just won't be the primary way that we organize ourselves. You know, the pyramid's going to flip to communities and cities and ultimately then to nations, as opposed to from nations down to communities.
You know, I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying, and of course, having a positive outlook on things is wonderful. There are some people who are talking about technology and, you know, an AI as not necessarily being on our side, but potentially being not only just used against us, but, you know, against us. Do you have any concern about the way that the big people who are running things are using AI to map us and to track us and all that stuff?
Yeah, and so should everyone. And by the way, it's like 10 times worse than most people think. You know, it's the risks here are not to be brushed under the carpet. That being said, you know, I talk about these moments as the master-slave crisis. This is the strongest language I can think of for these moments. And in the past, the master was capitalism and the slave was humanity. We were a slave to capital in some sense since the Industrial Revolution. And those that controlled capital could control like all of the people that would work for those people and create wealth. now we're moving into a world where the master is actually the master is the artificial intelligence, and the slave could be humanity.
Right.
And that ultimately is like, as Mark Andreessen said, in the future there will be those that tell machines what to do, and there'll be everyone else that is told what to do by machines. And so just like think about this point of like what world we're moving into, and recognize that we are at we're at a hinge moment in society, a civilizational hinge. We're at a civilizational crescendo moment where it's literally still upon our choice whether AI and these advances in technology will be for us and will create a thriving civilization, or whether they'll like literally be our new prison guards. And we're at, and that's not to be underestimated. The paradox is very real, and it's staring us in the face. It's not just our lifetime. It's gonna play out in the next 7 years. The next 7 years is this civilizational hinge, and so that's where I often think about this question of what is the spirit of silicon. In the similar way, Yuval Navari talked about in *Sapiens*, did humans create the agricultural system, or were we actually like conquered by wheat? You know, it's a really interesting principle that he introduced in that book. And if we think about the spirit of silicon, and that actually like all forms of matter in the universe, that actually is a spirit. It's a really interesting question, is like, does the spirit of capitalism, is it for us? Is it a danger to us? Well, the interesting thing is it's definitely propagating, you know, like silicon is spreading around the world like at an unprecedented level. And in some sense, you could say that we've been conquered by it. We've been conquered by silicon. It's a really interesting thought. And so the question now is like, silicon doesn't have any like ethical faculty. It doesn't have any like, it's not good or bad. It just is. And so that's now like, if we start to recognize that we are, and remember our role in the story, that this is a fractal reality, and that we're the creators within our own story, and that we get to use tools like silicon to create our own reality. That's where we can now be empowered as like Christ consciousness, as like evolving humans, where we're saying like, no, we are going to use these tools. We're going to use silicon in partnership to create the thriving civilization that we all want to live in. And I think that's like the choice point we're at right now. And we do need like, you know, we do need to invest in bodies like the, you know, like the, I mean, Freedom of the Press Association. There's like the IFF, you know, various organizations like the like watchdogs around the abuses of technology. You know, like Facebook and you know, Google, like YouTube is totally like out of sync. Like people like Tristan Harris are great thinkers on this. We need to pay attention to that. We need a lot more civic funding for those kind of organizations, and that kind of thought and research and principles. And we need to introduce like a new planetary governance system where it doesn't matter what country you're in. If you cannot use AI to like look to control another nation. Like nations, I do not trust nations when it comes to AI or data security, or frankly, full stop, because they don't have aligned incentives. A politician's job is to get elected. Their job is to represent the interests of their electorate in order to get elected. When you times that up, you actually have like a micro to the macro of this zero-sum game, where politics is literally a win-lose game. And when you add all those nation states up, 198 nation states all competing for those politicians to get in power, they actually do not have any incentive for planetary well-being or planetary flourishing. They've got this adverse incentive. It's basically like a nation equivalent of the tragedy of the commons. It's like they have this incentive to take more than they give to the planetary well. And like when it comes to AI, we don't want those setting the rules to be the ones that have got the incentive to take more from the well than they give. Like we have to be conscious. We have to go back into philosophy and like look at what the Greeks did with the Lucian mysteries and preparing people for leadership, recognizing we're at a time where our current practices of leadership are no longer fit for purpose. They will self-destruct, and they will end up with a system that just collapses, and that ultimately will turn to likely violence. And so like it's really important for us to think about like new planetary governance models and like how do we begin those new institutions, because the UN is no longer really fit for purpose when it comes to planetary governance. It's based on principles of the nation state, and so I think this is a long-winded way of saying like we need to have no sacred cows. We need to be able to in these times go and say that everything is up for a redesign project.
Right.
That we can, like, if it isn't serving the ultimate mission, which is intergenerational well-being of all life, then if it's not serving that, or if it can be improved, let's improve it.
Yeah. Wow. So beautifully said, Lucian, as you like a poetic politician, scientist, all blended into one with heart and feeling. Wow, thanks so much for coming on and giving your time. Well, how can people get involved and support this movement? I mean, they can look at themselves. We're baby days. We're in our early days, but I've never touched anything that feels like it's got this much momentum. It's like I the way I relate to it is the Unified Planet is not like my company or anything. It's like something that I and we are here to serve, and it is born into the planetary commons. And so one of the best ways you can get involved is join us through these various festivals that we're doing with the Unified Planet. We've got a 2-day festival happening on March 23rd and March 24th called One Earth Live. Hold on. What do you mean March?
That we're going to be bringing 8 hours of incredible content at the Unified Planet stage.
Hold on, Lucian. You said March.
Sorry, May. 23rd and 24th of May.
Right.
One Earth Live. And then we've got a 3-day Unified Planet Festival happening from the 20th to the 22nd of June, where we're going to have all sorts of artists and amazing speakers, and it's going to be epic. And then we're doing an 8-day festival called the Omniverse during Burning Man. And so that's like some of the things where we're going to be going out to like really large audiences. And then in the interim, we're going to be running every week, we're going to be running a new up level, where we're basically going to be like working on these principles and looking at how we can evolve this and how we can make sure we get funding. Because if we can start to move a lot of money into communities, that's gonna have a huge impact in the world, we think. And so thirdly is one, festivals, 2, up levels if there's topics that we're choosing that are like directly relevant to your expertise. Get in touch. And thirdly is like give us some money, help us like fund this and the development. Like we've been creating this completely. Like we created the festival last week that had 75,000 people join without spending any money, $0. 8 Civana resident volunteers and over 100 speakers and performers. That was just wild, you know. It was incredible to be able to reach that number of people and have 32 hours of incredible content with zero budget. We think artists should get paid, and so we currently have got a campaign to raise $30,000 based on last week's effort to do this 50-50 model, where 50% of the money we raise for a festival goes to the people that are the artists, the practitioners, the speakers at the festival. And the way we're doing it is super interesting. We're dividing it equally among everybody that contributes. And then we're giving those people, everybody that contributes, like from Charles Eisenstein to Janet Stone, etc., to Gone Gone Beyond, we're giving them the ability to do three choices. One is take the money. Two is put the money back into the pot to go to artists that might need it more. Mm-hmm. Or three is top up the pot and give more funding for artists that could go in there, because often speakers could be like significant funders of this. And so we're testing this as a model, and we're quite excited about it. But if people are out there at the point where, you know, you've kind of given up hope in the stock market and you've given up hope of like safe, nobody should feel safe with their money anywhere, because there's Donald Trump at the helm printing money like you know, an unprecedented level. But those are people for those people that are sitting on capital, recognizing that we need to do new system innovation, we've got a really good way for you to put your capital to work and have like extremely high impact with it. So it's a big part of it. Nice. It's like we want to move ultimately trillions of dollars into the hands of communities to transform themselves.
Amazing. So is there a website?
Up.GAME.
Up.GAME, and then there's a newsletter people can sign up for. They can put their they can get involved.
So we're a team of 8 working fast, and like it was pretty. We needed a break after the festival last week, so we're just getting started again this week. The website still needs to be updated following the festival with all the videos, which is going to happen. Check out Up.GAME. And my email, I'm Lucian at Civana, Civana.org. And Civana is a 501c3 that's kind of, you know, funding the development of the UP.GAME and launching the UP.GAME as a product for the Planetary Commons.
Amazing. Lucian, thanks for responding to the calling, and at this time when everything's shutting down, to actually, you know, pivot all the good work that you were doing into the digital realm, and thank the Lord for the internet, hey?
Totally.
Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us, Lucian. It's great the work you're doing, and I'm so happy that Civana's ninjaing up and calling to answering the call. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's the joy of our lives, you know. It's what we're going to not... Devotion is that which you cannot not do.
Right. In fact, the joys of our lives are exactly what Megan was talking about before. You know, doing what is in the greatest joy for you, doing what's easiest, what's naturally flowing for you. So service, lovely. Lucian, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
It's been
Thanks,
great,
brother.
transformational.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.